Hi there, it's me again, Christine. And yes, you are still in my YouTube channel, Let's Talk Audit and Insurance. Although today you may feel like stepping into a time warp of some sort. As for this playlist, we are most definitely not going to talk about audit and insurance, but about research. As I am also currently handling accounting research classes in the university, the birth of a new playlist is hereby warranted. So, with this, welcome to Let's Talk Audit and Assurance, the research playlist version. This is intended for undergraduate students taking up research classes and who desire that maybe extra dose of inputs to make your research recipe just a tad bit tastier. And by that, I mean hopefully easier. So, what are we waiting for? Let's dive right in. So now you are enrolled in a research class, huh? The biggest, most daunting requirement given to you by your instructor would probably be this: find a research problem. O, di ba? Kakasimula lang natin, problem agad yung pinag-uusapan. We've only just met and already we're talking about a problem. So, at the very start, allow me to invite you to change our mindset as early as now about research, shall we? Instead of thinking of a research problem, why not think about a research topic? Or better yet, my personal favorite, think about a phenomenon, a happening, an occurrence in your discipline that has piqued your interest. So, where else do we start but choosing your research topic? Let's dip our toes in the water. Let's start with a dose of inspiration. In the next few slides, I'm going to show you abstracts of actual research papers created by research students, and for some of them, co authored by me and some of our research faculty, just to show you that, yes, ladies and gentlemen, it can be done. Coming up with a research paper is very much doable, even at the undergraduate level. In fact, most of these abstracts that I am showing you have already been published in reputable journals. Let us start, for example, with one of my favorite papers about the centroid analysis on the patterns of ethical sensitivity from the social interactions of accountancy students. Now, most definitely, you would see that this particular research paper is in the discipline of accounting education. I personally co authored this one with some of my students way back during the day. Another interesting paper is a Monte Carlo simulation on the average net savings of income groups pre and post effectivity of the train law. Now, for those of you who are in the Philippines, then you must have been very aware that when the train law was, when the train law became a law, it generated a lot of questions, especially as does this really help the low and middle income earners? So even before or right at the onset of the train law, the researchers and I did a simulation to determine what would be the effect of this on the take home pay or the net savings of the different income brackets. And with that, we came up with this research paper. Another interesting paper co authored by one of our faculty members and her students is exploring the relationship of corporate social responsibility reporting, its quality, firms' market values, evidence from the Philippines' most actively traded publicly listed entities. Looking into the question of does corporate social responsibility really have an impact on the market value of the listed firms? Perhaps another interesting study you might want to look at is the fractal statistical analysis of Enron stock prices. For those of you audit buffs out there, you must have heard about the great scandal that is Enron, right? So, together with a co faculty, we decided to do a fractal statistical analysis on the behavior of the Enron stock prices right before and when the fraud was finally made public. Very, very interesting findings we have had there. Now, in the realm of taxation, there have also been studies published or presented regarding this one, such as, for example, the effect of excise tax in petroleum products to air pollution level in the Philippines. Does imposing excise tax really reduce air pollution? Does it really serve the objective or one of the objectives for which it was levied? Or an interesting study that attempted to look into, well, basically bridging the effects of climate change or natural occurrences to businesses. And it's the study on an analysis on the effect of the El Nino Southern Oscillation Cycle to the profitability and marketability of fishing businesses listed in the PSE. interesting topics, right? And again, these are all done by student researchers, co-authored with with their advisors and or faculty members. Another interesting study that was conducted by one of our research teams is the relativity of structural classification to financial behavior of higher educational institutions in Cebu, banking on the fact that different institutions have different business models, right? Having said that, then perhaps you might expect a sectarian school or those run by religious sects to have a different business model from a purely commercial educational institution. And so this study attempted to look into, is there really such a distinct structural classification of business models across these two different, well, expectedly different types of educational institutions? That was the inspiration for this study. And most recently, I'm very happy to share with you that my students and I have also published in the Recolatas Multidisciplinary Research Journal, a Scopus Index journal, a paper on the auditor's professional skepticism and its relationship with their thinking styles. Special shout out to my researchers, Jovi, Ariel, Lorimar, Jurinel, and JJ, of course. It was a very wonderful research experience because we were really so invested on the topic. Like, I mean, come on, again, for audit buffs out there, hasn't professional skepticism really been something we invoke in audit for like the entirety of the discussion for auditing theory? And yet, at this point, we wanted to look at, is professional skepticism affected by the thinking styles? We even went so far as to looking at, is professional skepticism affected by demographic factors, such as, for example, the number of years of experience in the firm, or maybe as to whether, even as to whether you are male or female, or even as to whether you have a license or not? So these are things that piqued our interest, and from that interest, lo and behold, we were able to publish this paper. Inviting you to take a look at this paper if you want. It's really quite an interesting read. Of course, I have to say that I'm one of the authors, but I'm including the link to the full paper in the description box of this video in case you may want to pay it a visit. So the point of showing you all of these abstracts is to show you proof that it can be done, ladies and gentlemen, even with just one school year. In fact, when we started having our research trainings, we were able to come up with a publishable paper in a matter of 3 days to a week for as long as we have the data ready and available. But the point being, it can be done. Okay, so if you're a student currently enrolled in research, it can be done and you can do it. And the dream is for you, of course, to publish your paper in the future. So since we have started with that dose of inspiration, let's try to concretize, hopefully, this inspiration or this appreciation with an article critique. So perhaps as an assignment, if you will. Of course, it's totally up to you. If you are not currently my student, totally up to you if you would do this or not. But it's going to be a very great exercise regardless. But as an assignment, perhaps you might want to visit the Erudite Conference Proceedings or the Dividends Journal of Accounting Research. Actually, both of these are from the National Association of CPAs in the Philippines. Now, I am starting off with this one just in case you still do not have a research topic in mind. So, assuming that at this point you're still totally blank on the items you wish to research on. Now, most definitely, your department or your teacher would require you to come up with a research topic within your discipline, right? So, with that, you may want to start with this. The Erudite Conference Proceedings or the Dividends Journal of Accounting Research can be a very good starting point, as both of these are, again, from the National Association of CPAs in Education, and I have provided the link in the description box as well. So you may visit that, or if you already have a research topic in mind, if there's already that initial interest, that initial call to do a research on a particular topic, you may want to, as an alternative, visit Google Scholar, ProQuest, or other scholarly journal sources, assuming you already have, like, a topic in mind. Now, after you have found an article that has piqued your interest, and again, make sure, just so that this exercise will also be useful later on to your course requirement, make sure that that article does not only pique your interest but is also aligned to your discipline. Once you have found an article, write an article critique. Now, I have found, or we have found, a very wonderful resource to guide you in writing an article technique, and it is actually coming from the University of Arizona Global Campus Writing Center. They even have guidelines on how to write an article critique, but what I personally like the most is that they have given an illustration or a sample of an article critique. So again, I'm providing the link in the description box so that you can follow the website of the University of Arizona Global Campus Writing Center, and make sure to click on their sample article critique so you could see how it's done or how it would look like. Okay. Now, if you want to even further your preparation for the start of your research journey, what better way than to make sure that you're already following the APA guidelines in the writing of your critique? Okay, so even when this is just the teaser, you may want to follow the following page layout instructions. Paper size should be 8.5 by 11, not A4, not A4, but 8.5 by 11. 1 inch margins all throughout. The font type and the size should be Arial 11, and it should be double spaced. Now, because the training, or this particular playlist will actually be leaning towards the writing of a publishable research paper, so we should also, as early as now, practice writing concisely. And with that, we're going to incorporate or impose a maximum number of pages, and that will only be a total of 3 pages, including the reference list, the references, or the reference list. All right. So you may want to do that if you want to, give a more concrete step, or take a more concrete step towards finding a research topic, and of course, eventually writing a publishable research paper. So, assuming that you are already done with the article critique, now know the basics. Okay, so whenever you come up, or whenever you chance upon an article that you are interested in, know the basics, know the basic research theory, such as, for example, be able to spot what is the research topic and what are the research questions to that topic. Because you don't only identify the topic, but you reduce the topic into answerable questions. That's essentially the story of research. At the start, you ask a question. Throughout the process, you endeavor to answer the question. And at the end, when you come up with your conclusion, then you give us what is the answer to the question. And then you have to also determine, in the case of, certain classes, if this were an undergrad setting, can different groups have the same research topics? It's possible to have the same research topic but a different research question, right? So that makes it all the more beautiful, because it doesn't mean that you each need to have a unique research topic, but you can have the same topic for as long as you're asking different research questions. A very important hallmark of finally coming up with a research topic is to look for the literature. Now, it has been said that research is kind of like joining a conversation of scholars. And so, by joining this conversation, how do we join this conversation? Rather, we go to the literature. At the very start, you must be able to do a preliminary literature search. While you may not yet be able, or while you may not have to write the formal literature review part of the paper just yet, as you are still trying to find your topic at this point, right? But do an initial literature search, just to show if, or just to show you if the question you are asking has not yet been answered. Of course, we wouldn't want to simply join a conversation and answer the same question that has already been answered by other scholars, right? So we go to the literature to determine if the question we are asking has not yet been answered. Also, be on the watch out for what fieldwork methods have been used by these scholars. Did they use surveys? Did they use surveys or questionnaires? Did they do interviews? Was it through focus group discussions? Or did they perhaps perform observations? It would be very interesting for us to know their fieldwork methods, because one thing you get to realize later is that you could actually ask the same questions as them, but then use a different method to answer the question. And then that will make your research topic novel. And then, of course, we also have to determine what methodologies have been used. Did they go for quantitative? Did they go for qualitative? Did they go for mixed methods? But more of that in another input that we will soon be having about research methods. Okay, so now that more or less you have an idea of the basics, know what is required of you. Now, this one will definitely depend on your institution or your university or your teacher, but these are the most common requirements for an undergraduate research course, particularly if you will be coming up with a publishable research paper. So, one such common requirement is to come to a topic hearing, or sometimes called a title defense. So, the topic hearing will simply ask you to present the working title, what is the proposed topic, what is the main research question, and depending on your school, depending on your research teacher, you may also be asked to present a preliminary literature map. Now, the purpose of the literature map is simply to show whether there is no duplication to the topic and the question, more on the question. There's no duplication to the question that you are asking. Now, most schools, most teachers would also ask you to come up with an elevator pitch. So, if you can imagine taking an elevator ride, well, definitely that's quite a short ride, right? So, elevator pitch is how you sell your topic to a prospective advisor. Normally, the elevator pitch will only last for like 5 minutes. Okay, so imagine approaching a prospective advisor and convincing this person to be the advisor for your research team. You have to be convincing. So you need to be able to deliver what needs to be said in 5 minutes. So that's the elevator pitch. Now, another thing that we normally require, and is usually the requirement rather for Research One courses, is of course the proposal hearing. So once you have convinced an advisor or convinced a faculty to be your advisor, that advisor will work with you throughout the entirety of your manuscript, and at the end of usually one semester you'll be asked to come up, or you'll be asked to attend a proposal hearing. So in the proposal hearing, these are the parts that would normally be prepared and presented and defended. The working title, the introduction, and in the introduction, it is already where we will find the literature review as well, the conceptual framework, the methodology, and references. So notice that in the proposal hearing, there is still no data gathering yet. So you're basically still proposing your topic. So you should be able to prove during the proposal hearing that there is something you can contribute to the pool of knowledge, there is something that you can contribute to the conversation of the scholars. You're not simply duplicating what they have done in the past. You're not simply repeating what they have done in the past, but there is something that you can contribute to the pool of knowledge, and that your proposal is feasible. Now, the second consideration that your proposal is feasible is particularly important, especially if you're in the undergraduate level and that you need to finish this research within one school year. So you need to be able to find one that you can be sure to finish in one school year. Okay, so no data gathering yet. Simply propose what you plan to do to a panel of experts. Another thing that you would have to already be able to picture out will, of course, be the methods and the data that you wish to use because it's part of the methodology section. Will you be gathering primary data, or will you simply be utilizing secondary data? No, so these are things that you should already be able to envision as early as the proposal phase of your research. And also, please be on the watch out for similarity indices. So again, this will depend on the university policy, but usually the similarity index should be 10% or less. This is, of course, in order to address the evils of plagiarism. Okay, so try to hit a similarity index of 10% or less once your paper gets processed for similarity check or plagiarism checks. That would normally happen after your proposal hearing already. All right, so again, the question of what research topic should I be choosing? Well, maybe as a start, you may wish to tap into your interests. For example, If you're an audit buff like me and you may want to look into auditing as a field of interest, well, at the onset, I would think maybe the code of ethics is something that might be interesting to study about. If, for example, you're talking about law or the regulatory framework for business transactions, maybe you can play around the idea of the corporation code. In the case of taxation, well, why not income taxation, right? For example, in the case of education, maybe program choices. Why have students chosen the accountancy degree? Or why have students chosen to shift from the accountancy program? In the case of FAR, why not do a study on biological assets? Or maybe for a FAR derivatives? Or maybe goodwill? Or maybe impairment of goodwill. Interesting things, right? For management services, you may want to look at decision making models. Again, tap into your interest. For example, this is patterned after the board exam subjects, right? You know just how full to the brim our syllabus and TOS are for the board exam. So why not try to hit, you know, two birds with one stone and come up with something that you find interesting coming from the varied list of topics we have in our syllabus for the board examinations, for example, and study that. That way, you would never be able to forget a topic ever again. So, tap into your interest. Just one caution, steer clear of biases. Now, I know it's always nice to work on something that we are interested in, something that we are passionate about, but as much as possible, steer clear of biases so as to ensure that your paper will also be objective. I remembered having a group of students who wanted to study about shifting courses from BSA to another degree program, and they were all shifties. So I decided to put a break on that proposal because they felt strongly against the department because they felt wrongly, they felt that it was wrong for the department to have forced them to shift courses. So they were very negative about it. And so I told them just to find another topic. Now, another group pitched the same topic, and I decided to approve it for them, mainly because I sensed that they were not really strongly biased against the topic. So, as much as possible, steer clear of biases. Remember, as researchers, we are in the search for truth, and the truth should not be tainted by our personal biases. Okay, so once you have tapped on your interest, the next thing you might want to do is decide on the niche. So we're going to make our decision as detailed as possible so that eventually it will bring us to our research question. For example, if you are looking at auditing, and a while back we said, well, code of ethics might be interesting, but then find the niche. There are so many things in the code of ethics. Maybe I want to look at the threats to fundamental ethical principles. In the case of RFBT, we said, why not corporation code? But again, that's a lot of topics under corporation code. You may want to go for one person corporation. For tax in the field of income taxation, why not take a look at create law or certain provisions of the create law? For education or accounting education, program choices like the example I gave, the decision to shift or the decision to choose this particular degree program, right? And once you have decided on the niche, then join the conversation. How do we join the conversation? Listen to the scholars. How do we listen to them? Review the literature. Okay, so go for ProQuest, Google Scholar, Emerald, Sage, or even the conference proceedings and the dividends that I have mentioned a while back. Go for sources that provide you with a legitimate database for scholarly journals. Avoid Wikipedia, avoid blogs, avoid unpublished and unreliable articles. Okay, so we need to make sure that the conversations we are joining are legitimate conversations and conversations that have undergone a strict review process. Okay, watch out for the gaps. So, whenever we join in a conversation, we don't simply listen, but we also evaluate what things have they not yet found or what things have they not yet thoroughly investigated. And we are going at this point, this is where we watch out for the blank spots or those areas which have not yet been studied or the blind spots, facets or phases of areas that have been studied but have not yet been thoroughly investigated. That could most definitely propel you towards a feasible research topic. Okay, now here are some tips. You may want to download the five most recent and popular articles, check out the year of publication to determine recency, and the citation index to determine popularity. So if you've ever visited Google Scholar, you would normally see some filters at normally it would be at the left hand side, even for Procast. Okay, so you could filter by recency, you can filter by citation index as well. Now, skim read to avoid exhaustion. Take note, we are still here to find the topic. We are not yet doing the actual formal literature review. The idea is to stumble upon the one. So, in order to avoid getting you too tired to appreciate the process, then just skim read to avoid exhaustion. A good starting place will be the abstract. Okay, so good starting place. Of course, we'll have to start with the title. That's initially where our attraction would lie, right? That with the title, you may start with the title and then abstract, skim read the introduction because that is also where you will find possible additional literature that have been already reviewed by the researcher, the scholar, or the author, and then the conclusion. Okay, one beautiful thing to start with really is the abstract. Essentially, it's like a teaser or a preview. Once after reading the abstract, you feel that this is a very promising topic, then you can go to the introduction and the conclusion. Again, the idea here is to avoid you getting exhausted, so you'll have more energy later for when you actually write the research paper. Another is you can snowball the reference list. So, if, for example, you have chanced upon an article that you felt very much attracted to, okay, so upon reading the introduction part of that article, you will see the author or the researcher citing related literature. Then you can go to the reference list of that paper and then snowball from there. No? So, you can actually be guided as to what articles to read from the reference list of that starting research article. And one very neat thing I found, and most researchers have found, is to watch out for articles that are literature reviews in themselves. For example, something like this: Auditor Independence and Audit Quality, a literature review. So, this entire paper is simply a literature review about audit independence and auditor quality. So, this is going to be a very rich source of conversation for you to join in. It would also be quite easy for you to spot if there are still blind spots or blank spots coming from this conversation. So, not all topics have an article that is already a literature review in itself, but if you happen to chance upon one, that's a gold mine. Hold on to it and do not ever let go. All right, so after that, you identify specific potential research topics. How do we do that? Normally, for most articles, there is a section there about further research is needed. Okay, so you may go to the friend section, further research is needed, or you may want to go topic hunting. For this, I'd invite you to see topics with a new pair of eyes. It may have been a very well researched topic, but for all you know, there may still be blind spots there. Say, for example, was it done in a different country? Is there literature that says that culture might affect this particular phenomenon? Or different sets of regulations might affect this phenomenon? Well, it may be time for you to look at the same phenomenon, but this time from a different country. Or are we talking about a unique industry or a unique demographic group? Like, for example, when we did our study on auditors' professional skepticism and thinking styles, we have found that most of the literature have actually used students as a proxy for actual auditors. So when we did our study, we decided to go for actual auditors. And when we say actual auditors, those in public practice, including those who are already licensed and those who are not yet licensed. So it could be to a unique demographic group, or maybe unique socio-economic conditions, or maybe a different belief system. So this is what we mean when we say see with a new pair of eyes. It could even be with a different methodology or a different form of analysis. Say, for example, there's this topic that you are really interested in, but it has been well studied. But then you also noticed when you joined the conversation that most of the studies are gearing towards the quantitative approach. Maybe you want to look at it from a more qualitative point of view. So, seeing with a new pair of eyes. And then brainstorming and mind mapping. Connect the dots. Always go back to the literature to check whether your ideas have been covered. Whenever people tell you your research topic has to be novel, it seems like a very tall order, right? So just think about it this way, that your research topic, okay, that there is still something you can contribute about your research topic. Okay, there's still some points in the conversation that have not yet been thoroughly discussed, and you would like to come in and you would like to offer your findings in order to address that gap in the conversation, that lull in the conversation. So, brainstorming and mind mapping. A while back, we did mention a literature map. So, just to give an idea of how a literature map may look like, if you're normally working with a team, then I would suppose, well, generally there would be five student researchers in a team, right? So, maybe you could assign each team member to come up with or to read three articles. Then make sure that you don't duplicate the articles that have already been read by the other members. And then you can come up with a consolidated literature map. So maybe you can number the literature, and then who was the researcher who read that, who were the authors of the article that you have read, what was when was it published, what's the title, what is the concept or the theoretical model that was used, okay, what was the framework that was used, how were the data gathered, what method was used, was it quantitative, was it qualitative, where is the location or the locale or the research environment? Was it in the Philippines? Who did they make as respondents? Who did they interview? Okay. Are there variables? Did they measure certain concepts? What were the hypotheses used, if there were any? What relationships were being investigated? What were the important findings? And then what was the conclusion of the paper? And if that article has a separate section on FRIN, or further future research is needed, then you may also plug that in. It will guide you later on to determine the gap of the topic you are interested in. And then maybe you can add some of your personal notes. So the research, the literature map will be very handy for you later on to determine what particular research questions have not yet been asked, so that it will be your team who will ask that question, right? Then turn your topics into questions. So turn from the interest, we said develop the niche. So from the niche, we went on to more specific topics. This time, you can convert it into narrow, specific research questions. For example, in the case of auditing, we wanted to look at the code of ethics and we wanted to focus on the threats to fundamental ethical principles. Perhaps one research question you would like to ask is, what is the level of awareness of the small practitioners regarding threats to fundamental ethical principles? So it has become very specific. We are looking at how aware are the small practitioners, not even just any auditor, right? So we have determined or we have decided on a specific demographic group, and that in this case, in this example, would be the small practitioners. Where you may also want to ask, what are the most common threats encountered by small audit practitioners? Or how do these threats vary between single practitioners and partnerships? So, because within or among small practitioners, although they may not like that term, but audit firms, for example, who do not belong to the big four, so amongst those, then there will also be single practitioners there and partnerships there, right? So, do the threats vary between single practitioners and partnerships? So, we are now converting our niche, our topic, into answerable research questions. And when you present this later during your topic hearing, this is what the panel will be determining. This is what the panel will be looking at. They will determine if there is a contribution that you can make out of these questions, and if these questions are feasible, if these questions can be answerable within the span of time given for you to complete your research. All right, so we have asked here different questions, and these different questions may be answered either quantitatively, for example, if you want to measure the level of awareness, then we might go the quantitative route. Or if you want to ask what are the common threats encountered, then that might be more on the qualitative route. But again, whether quantitative or qualitative, we will be having a separate discussion on that. Okay, and after that, you have to decide. Now, when you make your decision, assuming that you have multiple topics, no, meron kayong napupusuan na multiple topics, then evaluate your options. Maybe a good rule of thumb will be for you to use rubrics, such as, for example, the originality, the importance. Is it worth it? Is there really something that you can contribute? Are you not studying something that is very obvious, right? So your topic needs to be exciting as well. You need to be able to sell your topic to prospective advisors. And one way to do that is to show that it is worth it. Okay, the literature base, so that we could point out that there really is a gap, there really is a blind spot or a blank spot, that there is potential in doing the research. The data access, especially since we only have one school year to finish this one, would you have access to the data? Will you be able to gather the data within the span of time? The resources that you would need, no, do you have in hand the resources, or would you need experts for this, right? Would you need to go to, say, for example, Manila to gather the evidence, right? So make sure that you have the needed data, the resources, the data collection, and of course, are you capable to perform the analysis? Of course, in the analysis part, we could always tap the expertise, say, for example, of our data analysts. And hopefully, you will also be guided with this one. Okay, in the case, for example, of our research classes, we're trying to come up with supports, no? Support, for example, with regards data analysis. And it's also important that you are personally attracted to the topic so that you won't feel too exhausted when you start working on it. I remember the very first research paper that I had published was not even about accounting, it was about gossip because like I was working with a co-author who was from the field of psychology, and we initially, as a starting point, no, decided to talk about how office gossip is so rampant and how we have all been victims of gossip. And then during the brainstorming, we said, hey, why not write a paper about gossip? And we read so many literature, but we didn't feel that tired. Of course, we felt tired, but then not really to the point of exhaustion because we were personally attracted to the topic. So if you can find that personal attraction, then I'm sure you will be in for the ride of your life. Now, a while back, we also made mention that you may be asked to come up with an elevator pitch. The idea of the elevator pitch is to convince the panel and hopefully a prospective advisor that there is something to the research topic that you are pitching or proposing. The elevator pitch is one paragraph. It must be delivered in 5 minutes max. If you exceed 5 minutes, normally the panel will stop you, right? So make sure that you stick to the essentials. And it points out two very important concerns. First, will you be able to contribute something to the pool of knowledge? Will your research be able to contribute something to the pool of knowledge? And is it feasible? Can you do it within the span of time? So, as a guide, when you make your elevator pitch, you may want to answer these questions. What? Okay, so what meaning explain the big picture. Why? Why is it original? Why is it unique? This is another way of asking, is there a gap? Is there a blank spot? Is there a blind spot? Then why is it important? Why is it valuable? Why is it worth it to look into that topic or to answer those research questions? And how? Explain how you will undertake your research. Okay, and then of course you will be preparing for the topic hearing, but this is something that is dependent on your institution or your school. This is just something that we use, as a guide for our students when they perform the topic hearing. All right, so I hope that we have given an input, at least, to skim the surface of how to find your research topic. Thank you so much for tuning in, and all the best. May you find the best research topic there is. And when I say best, the best for you. All right. Thank you so much. And I hope to see you in our next segment for the research playlist. I think our next topic will already be about how to write the introduction. But we can't go about writing the introduction until we have found the research topic. So good luck, and hopefully you'll find an advisor who is willing to work with you in that topic.